Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to another USSF Talk series. Today, we are very happy because we are going to be receiving our dear friend Alvaro Mordechai, that I'm going to be introducing after we start with our prayer. So, as always, we ask everyone to raise their thoughts, to unite their hearts, feeling the presence, the blessings of our Heavenly Creator, our brother Jesus, and the benefactors that have been helping and assisting us in this work of spreading love and enlightenment throughout the world. We feel their presence, their blessings, and we ask especially today for our guest speaker, Alvaro, so that he can convey all the message, this so important message for us to learn and to take to heart and to put in practice in our day-to-day lives. And so with that, we ask permission to start this talk. So again, thank you so much, everyone that has been joining us. It's been almost a year that every Saturday we are having this meeting with all of you from all over the world. And it has been a blessing being able to receive so many special people that has come here. Today we have my godson, Alvaro. And let me introduce Alvaro. Alvaro is a Spiritist speaker with talks based on his studies of the Old Testament. He speaks fluently Hebrew, amongst other languages, studied and learned Jewish laws and customs through years of living in Jerusalem. He aims to combine the knowledge of the interpretation of the Bible's sacred texts through the wisdom of the Jewish people with the gospel of Jesus under the light of Spiritism. He gives lectures and conferences in Brazil and abroad. Alvaro Mordechai is also a promoter and coordinator of group trips of the humanitarian organization Fraternity Without Borders. And Alvaro has been studying a lot about Paul's letters and all the life of Paul. And this is why we have invited him to talk to us about the importance of Paul's letters in current days. So welcome, Alvaro. Thank you so much for being here with us again. Now it's with you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's very happy to be here. And it's always a great challenge to make this lecture in English for us. It's amazing. I hope I could transmit this message for you. And today we will talk about the letters of Paul. And it's very interesting to notice that altogether, maybe all the writings that are assigned to Paul has no more than 80 pages. And if we compare a small letter of Paul to a Plato's dialogue or a treatise of Aristotle, the letters of Paul are much, much smaller. So the most interesting point here is that actually we have more commentaries, more monographies, more academic articles, more sermons about Paul's writings than any other ancient author. So we are dealing here with probably one of the biggest intelligence of the ancient world. It's a man who came and changed the point of view of the world about the Judaism and starts the Christianity in this world. But there are a few points that are very important also to notice. First of all, Paul is a Jew. He's a Jew and he's a Pharisee. And he has a great knowledge about the prophets. He has a great knowledge about the Torah. He has a great knowledge about the Jewish law and the dialectics that nowadays are condensed in the Talmud. And Paul will have a mediumistic experience with Jesus at the gate of Damascus. And after 3 years of introspection and this experience, this mediumistic experience, Paul will convert the way that he directs his energies, his potentialities into his heart. It's very important to notice. Paul did not convert the faith into another God. He will continue his faith that he had in the Judaism, the same God. He will not convert his religion, but he will planify his Jewish faith, and he will achieve the most deeper, the most inner meaning of the Old Testament after his experience with Jesus, and after he will make all this introspection in the oasis of Dam. It's also very important to notice that he is not just a Pharisee, he's not just a Jew, he just not has all this knowledge, all this wisdom about the Jewish culture, the Jewish tradition, the Jewish law, but he will also be a Jew, that he was born in the city of Tarsus. And the city of Tarsus was deeply involved in the Hellenistic culture, in the Greek culture. So here we'll see that Paul speaks fluently Greek, and he will have a great knowledge in philosophy, especially in the Academy of Athens and the Academy of Alexandria. So here we will see, as Emmanuel tells to us through the medium Chico Xavier in the book Paul and Stephen, that one of the most expected moments of the life of Paul was to take the good news, to take the Gospels to the capital of the philosophy in the ancient world, Athens. And he will go for a speech in the Areopagus. And when he comes to Areopagus, he will actually live one of the most disappointing moments of his life. Because when he's talking, when he's making his speech, people would look at him and they will say, maybe this is a crazy new God. Who is this philosopher? And when he's called by these people as a philosopher in Athens, in the capital of philosophy in that days, it shows that actually he had a huge knowledge about philosophy. But it's not enough for Paul of Tarsus. He's not just a Jew. He does not have all this culture, this knowledge about the Jewish tradition and the Greek language, and also the Greek philosophy, but also he will be a Roman citizen. And as a Roman citizen, he will have many rights, but these rights for him will not give any special condition, but it will be tools that will help him to the great mission of the chosen vessel. He will use all the rights that he had as a Roman citizen. According to the story, it tells us that his father, he was trading fabrics in the city of Tarsus, and he used it probably to weave. And as a trader of fabrics, he would sell fabrics to the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire would use these fabrics for military purpose. And someday, after long time making good business with Roman Empire, the father of Paul of Tarsus will receive as a condecoration, as a prize, this Roman citizenship. And Paul, as an heritage, will receive the Roman citizenship. So it's very important always to remember, Paul is a man of 3 words. He will be a Jew, a Pharisee, he is a Greek man, and he's a Roman man. He will always be in these 3 words all the time, together, mixed and twisted, and sometimes we cannot make this difference when he's acting like a Jew, when he's acting like a Roman, when he's acting like a Greek. Altogether, he's all the time a man of three words. And this is a common mistake that we can make. Just to look at his writings, if he was just a Jew, and forgetting all the other prism that he has. Another mistake that we can have when we look at the writings of Paul of Tarsus is to take verses out of the context. We have a political context, we have a social context, we have a cultural context, and Paul is writing an eternal message, but in these days, we're immersed in a special culture, in a special political moment for exactly Romans or Corinthians or Hebrew or wherever. But this sense we have to keep into our minds. There is a context into his letters, into that time that we cannot forget. And because it's an eternal message, we have to notice that always there will be something to learn into his message. Always there will be something to learn. We cannot commit the mistake and think, okay, now I understood what Paul is trying to tell me in this letter, in this versicle. Actually, the message that Paul is bringing is the message of Jesus. So, what Paul is telling us, it's eternal, it's immortal, it's something there will always something new to learn. But I just told here the chosen vessel. But what's the meaning of chosen vessel? Because we repeat, I think every one of us had once listened to this expression, but where does this comes from? What's the meaning of this? If I tell this to a Jew, a Pharisee Jew, in the times of Paul of Tarsus, what would this person understand about the chosen vessel? Vessel in Hebrew, kli. Kli ayakar, something very special, a very special vessel, something unique, something that is priceless. What's the meaning of this in Hebrew? So we do know that Hebrew language uses concrete words to bring a spiritual and philosophical meaning for some words. So if we say vessel in Hebrew to someone that has knowledge about the Torah and the Talmud, he will say, okay, I understand that in the land of Israel, we just have rain for 2 months in the winter. 2 months and just few days in these 2 months. But rain, it's a blessing that comes from the sky. It's a blessing of the nature. So it's very important, the rain, especially in Israel, that you have just rain in 2 months of the year. But what is more important, if the rain falls and you don't keep this water, probably it will miss in the future, in the next months. But if you construct, if you have a vessel to keep this water, you can keep this blessing for many, many months, for a long time. So what is more important, the rain or the vessel? Both of them goes together. If you have rain without vessel, okay, it's good, but it's not so good in the future. But if you have rain and you build a vessel, this is amazing for you in the future. It will make your life easier. It will be good for the agriculture. You will have no hunger. You will have a better life. And when we are talking about concrete words, this is the meaning. But when we are talking about spiritual way of thinking, we do know that God every day is sending his blessings to our world in a spiritual way, in every moment, in every point of the universe, through the fluidic universal cosmic, to the universal fluid cosmic, we are receiving his blessings, the blessings of God all the time, every day, and each and every moment. But if we don't have a key, if we don't have a vessel, we will lose it. But if we can make a vessel into our spirit and we can understand the purpose of life through using everything that comes into our lives to make the right choices and have spiritual evolution, we are building a vessel. So when we are saying here that Paul of Tarsus was the Kliyakar, or the chosen vessel, we are saying that he had full potentialities to achieve the goals of the newborn Christianity. Jesus came and his message would be needed to be spread for all over the world. So, from maybe centuries or thousands and thousands of years, Paul of Tarsus was constructing this vessel into his spirit, into his morality, into his intellectualism to achieve the purpose, the goal which he was born to spread the new Christianity for all over the world. And it's very interesting if we just want to make a link or a parallel to understand from how far should this purpose, this vessel, would be promised for earth, and for how long this would be preparating into his spirit. We can make a parallel, we can make a link with the history, with the history of Yonah the prophet, the book of Yonah. I already did a lecture about the history of Yonah the prophet, Jonah the prophet, and about his book, Into the Light of the Spiritism. But of course, in 1.5 hours, with my English especially, it's not possible to take all the comprehension of his book. But let's make this link and let's understand what is the book of Yonah talking about. So we see that Yonah is the first prophet, the only prophet that will receive a mission for non-Jewish people. He will receive a prophecy and he should take this message for the city, for the kingdom of Nineveh. And in the kingdom of Nineveh, his message would be spread, and even the king would listen to his message. And his message was the message of God, was the message that the hearts of the city of Nineveh should regret for their mistakes, for the mistakes with the free will, for getting far and far from God, for getting far from the light of God. And now, after listening to this message of Yonah the prophet, they would regret. They would go back to the light of God. They would, even the king of Nineveh, Anashpir, would listen to the message of Yonah. His message would echo into all the kingdom of Nineveh. And it's the same story with Paul of Tarsus, because he's coming with the message that comes from God through his son Jesus, and now he would say this message into a kingdom, a non-Jewish kingdom. And for these non-Jewish people, the message would echo through times, and they would listen to this message. Of course, for some of us, it will take thousands of years, but it will never stop echoing this message. And even the king of this empire, Constantine, had converted himself to the Christianism. So we see here, there's a parallel. It's being said in the book of Yonah, there will be a prophet, there will be a messenger of God that will come with the message of Jesus, and it will bring to all the world. But Yonah, when he received this prophecy, he runs away from his job, from the purpose. So to where does he run away? The city of Tarshish. Hebrew, In Hebrew, it's Tarshish, but in English, it's Tarsus, the name of the city, the same city where Paul was born. But it's much, much more interesting when you think that in the message of Jonah the prophet, Jonah will be swallowed by a big fish that we know, of course, that it's not real, it's a metaphor. And being in the belly of a fish or being on a cave, it means that you are preparing yourself for a reincarnation. So we see here, there's a whole story that fits like a glove in the life and the purpose of the life of Paul of Tarsus. So we can say, in comparison, we can make a link and understand that this vessel, it was expected for God, and it was announced for God in the book of Jonah. And here we are seeing that actually Paul of Tarsus will meet Jesus in the gate of Damascus in this mediumistic experience, because he had a huge fluidic affinity with Jesus. And Emmanuel will say for us in the book Paul of Stephen that who used it to inspire Paul of Tarsus to write his letters was Jesus, or Stephen that was bringing the message of Jesus. So this fluidic affinity, it was constructed in thousands of years, probably. So now we can understand the versicles that Paul writes in his letter to the Galatians, chapter 2, versicle 20. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And he also will say, when I was still in my mother's womb, he chose me and called me out of sheers and generosity, how he has intervened and revealed his son to me, so that I might joyfully tell non-Jews about him. So we see that Paul of Tarsus is a man that was expected for this new era of Christianity in the world for maybe thousands or centuries before. But we can look at these different angles of Paul of Tarsus as a Roman, as a Pharisee, as a Jew, as a Greek, in many, many letters. For example, when he's writing his letter to the Corinthians, Paul says that he's dropping tears. Okay. For us, in a world of trials and atonements, it's okay. Sometimes we drop tears. But we will see that Paul, when he's writing for the Greek word, for the community of Corinth, he's using the wisdom, he's using his knowledge of the Greek culture to really show what he's feeling through his heart. So we will see that in the city of Corinth, there was a fountain. The name of this fountain, Fountain of Pirene. But who was Pirene? We will see that Pirene, she was a nymph, and she was the daughter of a Greek god with minor G. It's a god in the Greek mythology. We are talking about Greek mythology. And this was the god of the river Asopus. And Pirene had two sons, Cencreas and Lecheas. This is the name of the two ports in the city of Corinth. And she was, of course, very happy with her sons of Poseidon. But once Cencreas tried to ride a horse, but not any horse. It was Pegasus. It was a horse that had wings, that in the Greek mythology, it's the symbol of eternity. But there was another god. This other god was Artemis, that was the god of hunting. And Artemis throws an arrow and it will hit Synchreas. Artemis was trying to protect Pegasus from being right by Synchreas, and Synchreas will die in that place. And the mother of Synchreas, Pyrene, goes to this place and meet her son dead. Of course, this is probably the most terrible pain for a mother to feel in this world. And she cried. And she cried very much. She had a terrible pain. And it's said in the Greek mythology that in the place where she was crying, where she met her dead son, in that place, would forever be crying the tears of Pyrene, the place where was built the fountain of Pyrene, the symbol of glory, the symbol of pride of the city of Corinth. In this place, it was recorded the message of the Greek mythology, and it was known by all the people of the Corinth, of the city of Corinth. And Paul so will write when he's telling how he feels about the mistakes that the newborn community, Christian community of Corinth, because they choose wrong ways and they were not so committed to the love of God, Paul will write for them, "For I wrote you out of great distress and anguish of my heart, in my many tears, not to grieve you, but to let you know the depth of my love for you." He is writing to the people of Corinth. He's writing that the love that he had for them, even though they are committing all this mistake, and even though probably he will be crying for the mistakes for a long time, like Pyrene was crying till that day. Now he's saying, "Oh, the love that I have to you, it's stronger like the love of Pyrene, and I miss very much. I miss very much for the wrong steps that you take in this community. I regret he had pain, and for sure he has pain for each and every one of us, that he's saying that he is our spiritual father, that he is our spiritual mother, that he has this generosity and this immortal love for each and every one of us." But we will see in other letters of Paul many points that just can be understood. We just can understand if we look through the prism of this man that walks into three words. And here we see the letter of Paul to Romans. And we see in the first chapter just three verses that will say, "Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, and set apart for the gospel of God. The gospel he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, regarding his son, who as to his earth life was a descendant of David." So here, apparently, we are just reading 3 points. 1, Paul introduced himself as a servant of Jesus. Paul says that he's chosen as an apostle. 3, he says that the message of the good news of the Gospels is the message that comes from the Son of God that was announced through the prophets of the Old Testament, and he was a descendant of David. Okay, there's not too much. I understood this. But let's see what this really tries to mean in some know-how when we use all the context, all the political context, all these contexts that are involved in through these days. First of all, Paul is introducing himself, exalting a crucified man. And what can we understand when he's talking about a crucified man? The penalty of death, or the death penalty by crucifixion in that days, was a death penalty that was given for the greatest enemies of the empire. When the Roman Empire used it to crucify someone, it was an enemy of the state, and not just an enemy. It was someone that they used to hang in a public place, that everybody that would pass will see that terrible way of dying, and will say, if you follow this guy, if you take the message of this guy, you have the same death penalty into your life. When the Romans used it to crucify someone, it was to show that this message had to die according to the Roman political system. So here, Paul has already one reason to receive the penalty of death, the death penalty. But we will see that there will be maybe 10 reasons in just these 3 verses that he's showing that what he's choosing for his life cannot be understood according to the rules of a material world, of the egoism of empire. This cannot be understandable through the eyes of the material world if we take God out of this world. So here we see, and we do know that near the siege of Jerusalem in the 70s, this was a moment where more than 200 Jews were crucified because they were rebels against the Roman Empire. But in second place, after exalting a crucified man, he's saying, I'm not just exalting him, but more than this, I am an apostle. And what's the meaning of being an apostle? He was officially sent to bring the message of this crucified man. He was chosen. He was chosen by this one who was crucified. We do understand that now is in the spiritual world. And he will bring officially for everybody here to the capital of the Roman Empire, Rome. So the letter is for the Romans. But much more than this, he will say the good news, the Gospels, comes from the Son of God, and he is a descendant of the house of David. But there's one big problem, or maybe few huge problems. Why? Because in the year 54, Claudius the emperor was dead, and the new emperor became his son, his stepson, Nero. And Nero was just 17 years old, and he wanted to get the respect of the population of Rome, of the empire, of the senators. He wanted to be respected, but he was just a kid. He was just 17 years old. So he decides that he would decree that his stepfather, Claudius, he was a god. So Claudius now is a god, and he's the Son of God. So the Son of God, Paul of Tarsus is saying to us, it's not Nero, but this Son of God, the Son of God, was promised by the prophets. And Nero is not in the Old Testament, and Claudius are not in the Old Testament. And it's interesting because we say he's descendant of David, and we do know that Nero, he was not a Jew. He couldn't be descendant of David. But there's even a bigger problem, or a bigger answer, because for the Romans, all of this was problems. But for the word, this was answers. So Paul will say that the good news is coming by Jesus, by this crucified man. But what's the meaning of good news or gospels in this ancient world, in this time? The meaning of gospels, the meaning of good news was the message that only the emperor could give. Only the emperor could give good message, could give the word that it's called gospels in that time. But this good news was not so good. This was very good news for the aristocracy because they would become richer. They would have their interests very well taken care by the emperor that wanted the respect. But the people of Rome would suffer very, very much because we know that Rome had a huge, huge arm. And we do know that they use it to use the political system of bread and circles. But from where does this bread comes from? From where does this bread come from? That would feed millions, not thousands, but millions of people for months, that would be in that games that the gladiators would make the show, killing animals, killing Christians, killing people, killing slaves. So from where does this come from? Does this goods, this rich, this money would come from? And this would come from the exploitation of the poorest people of the Roman Empire. So here we will see that each and every time that the emperor would give the good news, we would see that these news were terrible for the exploited people of Rome, for those who the empire had conquered with military and with its arm. So we do understand here that what Paul is telling is that the message that really is good for people, it's the message that comes with an eternal sense and that will show that it doesn't matter how much you are suffering today. It doesn't matter what the Romans are doing to you, but we have a God. And this God promised for us the message and the coming of his Son. And his Son, the Son of God, brings the message that will comfort our hearts and that will make us strong in that days and to these days to continue. And it doesn't matter if you have coronavirus, if you have Roman Empire, if you are a slave, it doesn't matter. God is taking good care of you and he's sending his message as a good news. And the good news of God is challenging. In that days, all the Roman Empire and in our days are challenging all the material world. So here we see in the book Paul and Stephen example of the good news of the emperor. In the first chapter, we see Yohedeb, the father of Stephen. He's going through the open air market and he sees some soldiers of Roman arm, and he will be beaten very much for this arm, and he will go even like this with no reason to be beaten. He would go to the open air market, and when he comes to the open air market, he will listen the good news of the emperor. The good news for him was that now that he had already lost more than 95% of his land, of his farm, and he had already lost his wife because she couldn't support the news and the difficulty that they were living with all this good news. And he will listen, and at this time that he should leave immediately his land and he had no place to go, and he will not have any way to work and to feed him and his daughter and his son. And this is a sample of a good news. It was terrible news for the exploited people, for the poorest people, but for the emperor was a good news. For the aristocracy was a good news, but not anymore. Roman people, they had the political system of Roman pax, and the Roman pax will say that every time that a rebellion would start, they should immediately stop this rebellion, and they should kill everybody that was involved in the spreading of this message, the message of this rebellion, the message that for the Roman Empire would be aggressive. So the message that Paul is bringing to the people, to the poorest people, to the exploited people, is a message that the Roman Empire really hates, but it's an eternal message. It comes with the good news of the spiritual world and the love of God and the support of God for those who are suffering, who are constricted. So here we see also in this letter to the Romans that the letter to the Romans has a universalist message, and in that days this was really great news, because we will see that the Roman Empire was submerged in immorality, and you have no moral in business, and the Romans didn't have any moral in the family values, and they didn't have moral values at all. But there was one people that had great moral values, and they feel and they knew in their consciousness that they had something different. They were chosen by God to take the monotheism, to take these laws, the 10 laws of Sinai, and the other 603 laws of the Torah. Torah in Hebrew comes from the word orah, that means instruction. They had the instruction of God for how should we behave in this world, in this immoral world. And this was the Jewish people, of course. So the Jewish people used it to think in that days. They were very special and they were better people. Of course, just thinking. Because the message of the letter, it's universalist. But the Jewish people was thinking, we are chosen by God. We are special. We are better, was the idea that they were living, because they had all this morality or this code of the spiritual world, and they knew how to live. And the symbol, the greatest symbol of this pact with God is the circumcision. So the Jewish people would say, okay, I am circumcised. Okay, I am circumcised. And they are not, so we are better than them. There was a superiority sense here. But Paul of Tarsus will say, okay, it doesn't matter if you have circumcision. Circumcision in the meat is nothing if you are not really connected to God. To have a moral code, a moral sense, to have the spiritual knowledge, it's nothing if you're not connected to God. So circumcision just in the meat doesn't mean very much. So Paul says the words that it's written in the Yom Kippur prayer. And he will say, you have to have your heart circumcised. You have to have your spirit circumcised. Because if you are really have a pact with God, the creator of heavens and earth, into your heart, into your spirit, then you understood how you should behave. And not just to have something into your knowledge, but not living this into your life. So Paul will write in the chapter 2 in the letter to the Romans. If you are convicted that you are guard for blind, that you are light for those who are in the dark. If you are convicted that you are instructor to the foolish, and that you are teacher of children, that you are having the law, the embodiment and knowledge and truth, that you teach others, but do you teach yourself? Do you preach against stealing? Do you steal? Do you say that people should not commit adultery? But do you commit adultery? Do you say people that they should not adore idols? But do you rob the temples? So Paul is actually criticizing the superiority. He's saying there is no superiority. It's just a matter of connection to God. And to make this connection to God, you just need to be a human being. You just have to have goodwill. You just have to deal with your inner emotions. And you have to walk in the direction of the light of God. So we can say, okay, but it was a universalist message. And now we see that he's criticizing Jewish people. Okay, but this is what he will say to the non-Jewish people in the same letter. He will say always, always. He is not just criticizing. And he's not saying that the Old Testament is not good. Paul will always, always bring the Old Testament with the message of Jesus. And he will always bring the message of the prophets, of Moses, of Abraham, with the Gospels. Paul will always identify himself as a Jew, as a Pharisee, and he had a pride, a great pride of this. And he knew that it doesn't matter what was the ways that the Jewish people had chosen in that days. It doesn't matter, because the love of God is infinite and it's eternal. And it doesn't matter what you did, what you will do, what you had done, what you're doing now, but the love of God for you will never change. It always will be infinite. So the love of God for the Jewish people, although we know that the message and the contribution of the Jewish people are huge for humanity, huge. But in these mistakes that was happening in that days, Paul is saying, it doesn't matter. You have to know from where you should go from this day on. And for the non-Jewish people, he will say, and do you feel you have some advantage? Greeks, and when Paul is saying Greeks, he is saying Romans, Greeks, because the Roman word was living the Greek culture. So he's saying, do you feel you have an advantage? And we know that the Roman people, they had a superior sense of race, in the human race. Why? Because they had the political power, they have material comfort, they were building temples that could be seen till this day on, till our days. But he knew also that the Roman world was immersed in depravity and vulgarity. But he knew also that the Roman world was a war machine of conquest. And he knew, as we can see in the book 2,000 years ago, by the Spirit Emmanuel, that in that moment where a Roman senator, sees his daughter, and his daughter was sick, and he couldn't understand that she was sick, because it had a spiritual it has a spiritual truth in this, that it was an effect, so it should have a cause before. And this cause before should be spiritual from maybe another reincarnation. For some purpose, God gave him this challenging life. And what does Senator Publio Lentulus will say when he sees his daughter sick? He will say, okay, you know why she's sick? Because we have slaves. We have slaves in Rome from all over the world, and they are bringing their disease, and it's their fault. He is saying that the fault of his pain, the fault of his challenging life, it was the fault of the slaves. He had a superior sense of race, and he had a superior pride with his race. So Paul will say to the Greeks, to the Romans in that days, among you there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All of you have turned away. They have together become worthless, and there is no one who does good, not even one among the Greeks and Romans. Their tongues practice density. Their throats are open graves. The poison of the viper is on their lips, and their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery mark their ways, and the way of peace they do not know. There is no fear of God before their eyes. But here, we can think, oh, okay, so Paul of Tarsus, he's saying that he's superior. No, he will come to us and he will say, but I am obligated to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to wise and to the foolish. Paul of Tarsus will say, we do know that the humanity at all has done their mistakes, or better saying, our mistake. We have made many mistakes as Greeks, as Jews, as whatever, as foolish, as wise. We are committing mistake into the history of humanity. And Paul of Tarsus will say, I'm not better than you. But not just I'm not better than you. I'm obliged to you. I have obligations to you. And he will present him as a servant of God to the humanity. He will say, if I am obliged to Greeks and non-Greeks, to Jews, to barbarians, to everybody, I have to serve you. Because for us, when we have an obligation into our consciousness, we will just find peace. When we do our job, when we pay this obligation, and the way that Paul will choose for the eternity to find peace with his conscience, it will be to serve the humanity, to serve Greeks, Romans, Jewish people, to serve whatever who needs. And this is the greatest message that we could bring in these versicles, because sometimes we feel obligated to the people of our family, to those who lives to our house, for those who are living in our neighborhood, or maybe in our city, or for those who are in the same political party that I am, or for those who are living in the same country. But we have to understand that Paul is telling us that we wrote the history of humanity, and we had multiple reincarnations where, yes, we did good stuff, but also we had our mistakes, and it makes each and every one of us the author of the mistakes of humanity, and we have obligations to the humanity. We have to understand that to live in peace with our conscience, we have to be serving serving wherever who needs. All the humanity, Africans, Americans, Brazilians, wise, foolish, Arabs, Jews, whatever, Muslims, Chinese people, or in one word, all the humanity. Humanity. Our obligations are with the humanity. And this is enough. This is enough to understand the importance of Paul letters in our current days, to regeneration of our spirit, to understand that if we want to live in peace, we have to go to this introspection after meeting Jesus in the letters of Paul, in the words of the spirits, in the gospel of Jesus, in the words of someone that maybe in the subway told some message that can touch into our hearts and then can maybe bring introspection to our lives, and it will bring purpose of serving, purpose of being a servant of God wherever we are. And for those who are just human beings, those who are just humanity like us. So in this day, with this message, with these versicles, we can understand a little bit how great is the intelligence and how great is the message of the letters of Paul to our days. So I finished the lecture, the explanation, and I apologize for sometimes making my mistakes in English. I came here with good purpose, and I hope I could bring today some good news that Paul brought to us few thousand years ago.
Thank you, Alvaro. It's always so good to hear about Paul and to try to imagine how it was when he was there living. We often say that sometimes I think we misunderstand Paul because we think a lot about everything that he did before he had this his meeting with Jesus and the persecutions and all that. But it's important to make a parallel with our lives because when we analyze this, the way Paul was, one thing we have it that is very certain that it was his faithfulness to God. So he was absolutely faithful to God. He only had a different interpretation at the time, not say different, but he had one way of reaching God. He learned one way of reaching God, and he thought that that was it. That maybe there was no need for this to be expanded or to understand then the coming of Jesus. So I think it's always there's so much that we have to think about his life, about his examples, about all the situations that he has gone through. You did a wonderful job as well, always. Don't worry about the English. I'm sure it was very well understood by everyone. We have some questions now. If
Let's see. I'm lucky that you are here with me, and if I don't know the answer,
okay, we can work it out together, right?
yeah.
Okay, so Yasko is questioning. I am wondering if the unsuccessful speech in Athens was because the audience or peers there were not interested or prepared for the kind of message Paul was bringing. Isn't it a warning for us today to not impose our beliefs to one's not having the ears to listen and eyes to see, we may also endure same frustrations, right?
It's interesting that Emmanuel tells to us that after going to this moment at the Areopagus at the city in the city of Athens, Paul would go back to the city of Corinth, and when he's in his way, he was passing through these simple communities where people were very simple people. They were just living in the agriculture, and they didn't know much about philosophy, and they didn't know too much about this whole Greek word of Athens. And he would spread, of course, also the message of the Gospels. And when he's telling the message in this place for simple hearts, he will see that they would listen and they would understand that this seed was planted. The seed of the gospel was planted into the people that were really simple. And Emmanuel tells to us that this is the moment that Paul understands why Jesus was spreading, especially his gospel, into the Galilee. Galilee? Galilee? How you say
Gal-
this in English?
Galilee.
Galilee.
Yeah.
And he will understand why he's bringing this message into, especially in Galilee and not in Jerusalem. Because in Jerusalem, mainly, not all the Pharisees, but most of the Pharisees, they were so sure that they know so much about the spiritual world that they could not receive the message of God, the Son of God. And in this moment, Paul of Tarsus understand that to receive the message of God, you have to have thirst into your spirit. You have to have hunger into your spirit. You have to really be looking for something in the spiritual way, because we know that we have many answers in the material world, but also we have a lot of illusions. And now this is the illusions of pride and glory, and the illusion of that maybe I'm a very smart and wise person. This will just make me not to understand the message that comes in the most simple way. And the spirits in the book of spirits will say that the message of God, the divine laws, are spread all over the nature. And if those, and for those who wanted to look and to understand the message of God, they could just look to the nature and they would understand it in every epoch of humanity. So we see here that it doesn't really matter. It's not the purpose to just spread the news every day and all the time by our words, but we have to spread the good news into our deeds, into what we are doing, because people cannot listen, people can close their eyes, but when we live with Jesus into our life, we are teaching the world what's the way that we should choose, that we should look to regenerate the humanity, to go for this special connection with God. When we are living the Gospels, we are spreading maybe much more than just speaking, than just telling. The Pharisees, they would to talk and to say about the message of God. But the most important way and the most important purpose is to live with Jesus, to live with God, to live with the message of the gospel, of the good news into our spirit. And then it will be in everything that we do. And it's much more stronger.
Great, Alvaro. We have here Santana,
Mm.
Annelise, Cleide, the friends of ours that are watching and following us. But that's it, really important what you said, Alvaro, because sometimes, it's not about the verbosity. Sometimes we speak too much and we do too little. Um, and I sympathize with your question, Yasko, because I know how much we would like for people to awake, and sometimes we feel that it is our obligation to do something about it, and especially in the sense of, like we are referring here the post talks and etc. But while we are not able to do that, there are many people that are ready and that we can look for them and do whatever we can to help and assist. But above all, like Alvaro said, it's mostly about living the life. And when we are living the life, I normally say, I mean, especially in those days that we are living now, um, it's been almost a year. Uh, we can see overall how much people that have faith are coping much better with everything that is happening than people that do not have any kind of faith. And in our case, is more specifically talking about spiritism and the understanding that we have about it, it's definitely making a huge difference in the sense of being capable of dealing with everything else. But we have more things here. Let's hear from Alvaro. Do we have any information about the role of Paul today on Earth's evolution?
Yes, we do have. We have a book that it was written by the Spirit Emmanuel through the medium Chico Xavier, and it's called, I'm thinking in English. We don't have this book in English. Let me remember in Portuguese. Amor e Sabedoria de Emmanuel,
Love as we and wisdom. We don't have it in English yet.
by the who compiled this
Filed.
compiled this book
Mm-hmm.
was Clovis Tavares. And he says in a message, Emmanuel says to us in a message, that Paul is working with the most intelligent people of the earth that have their hearts away from the gospels of Jesus. He's working with the conquest, let's say, with the message of Jesus to these hearts, these most intelligent people, these most intelligent spirits that still in the earth didn't comprehend the gospel of Jesus.
Yeah, I remember this passage. It's when he says that, and it's amazing when we think about it, Alvaro, because you would say, and even referring to your question again, Yasko, because we could think, well, it would be easier for Paul to come and work with us. We are semi-ready, right? There is much to be done and to be accomplished. Perhaps he could come halfway through, but from his characteristics that we know, he didn't talk to the Jews at the time that supposedly were halfway through. He went to the most difficult task, which was to talk to the polytheist people that had no clue whatsoever of the only God. And not only he got only God through their throats, but he put it also, all the teachings and knowledge that Jesus brought. And now in this book, I remember this passage that he says that he's working with the most difficult case, the conquerors of all time that have caused a lot of trauma to us in terms of history, to try to bring them back to Jesus. So he's he's taking care of the hardest cases. Thank you so much for reminding us of that, Alvaro. That's amazing. Okay, we have more questions here. historically, how circumcision symbolized one's male's connection with God.
We see in the Old Testament, in the first book, the book of Genesis, the book of Bereshit, Abraham, he was 99 years old, and he wanted to make a pact in his flesh with God. So the circumcision starts with the first Hebrew person in the world, the father of the Judaism, that it's Abraham, and he makes the circumcision with his blood, with his flesh, to show the world that he was bringing a connection with the real creator of heavens and earth, the real creator of universe. And this was one God for the whole universe, and this is the beginning of the monotheism that was being spread, because Abraham spread the monotheism in Babylon, in Egypt, in for the, how you say, the Palestinians, they come from the I forgot the name.
Phoenicians? No. No.
For the whole people of the
Babylonians.
yeah, for the ancient world. So the message of Abraham was to bring the monotheism to God, and how he did it, how he shows to the world, making something into his flesh, into his body, that would be a symbol for the Jewish people. And it's interesting that in some moment of the Judaism, the prophet Elijah, how you say his name, Eliyahu,
Elijah.
Elijah. And we see that he didn't believe that the Jewish people would continue with the circumcision. Until nowadays, the circumcision is done in the Jewish people with 8 days of life. And every time that a kid, a boy, will be circumcised, it's we have a chair that no one sits, and we say this is the chair of the prophet Eliyahu. This is the chair for this prophet that didn't believe that the Jewish people, that he couldn't believe that the Jewish people would continue this for the eternity. So we do know that Paul already told us it's not important if you have the circumcision into your flesh. The most important is to have the circumcision into your heart, into your spirit, to have a pact with God, that you live it, that you really live into your emotions, into your feeling, into your heart, into your deeds, not just to have something like to write in a t-shirt, okay, I have a connection to God. It's different to make something external and to make something that it's really part of our lives. So the historical way that we see that it goes as a culture, as a law, as a tradition into Jewish people, it begins with Abraham.
Great. Another question we have. We have our friend Christina from Winterthur, Switzerland, watching as well. How did Paul's time in the desert help him shape his message?
We have to bring this into our lives to understand. We know that in the parable of the lost sheep, we will see that there's a moment that the sheep is going with the flock, and this sheep doesn't want to go into the ways that it should go. That, how we say, I forgot how to say pastor?
Shepherd.
The shepherd. So there's a moment that this sheep doesn't want to follow the way that the shepherd wants to guide the flock. So the sheep says, okay, I don't want to know what you want to tell, shepherd. So I think there's a better way for me to choose fresh water. There's a better way for me to choose green grass. There's a better place for me. I don't want to go with you, shepherd. So this is us. When we are saying to God. I don't want to go through your laws, through through the way of life that you expect us to go. I don't want to follow with the flock. I want to do, whatever I want. So I will go to the desert. We think that we are going to a place that we have fresh water, better grass, and we are so egoist that we don't want that people goes with us. We want just for us this green grass, green, fresh, new grass. So we go and we follow our illusions, and there's a moment that we feel that we had committed a great mistake, because we will feel ourselves in the desert in a terrible moment where we are afraid of the animals of the desert, where actually we don't have any fresh water and we don't have green grass. We just have sand. The sand that we find in our illusions. And in this moment, we will regret our hearts and we will say, okay, you know what, shepherd, excuse me, but please, if you don't mind, come to me. I know you love me very much, and I know the shepherd should keep the sheep. I am a sheep of your flock. Please come and bring me back to home. I want to be with you. So this is the moment where we see what we are looking for, illusions. After Paul comprehends that he was going for not a good way, he was going through illusions into his life. And he meets Jesus. The shepherd went to him and talked to him. And he said, okay, what do you want me to do? Tell me. Paul says to Jesus. And Paul goes to the city of Damascus, and he will live in that days, difficult days, and he was blind, and he had all the difficulty. After he can see once again, and he understand that he was needing someone to guide him, to tell him in this physical world what he needed to do. He goes to Gamaliel, his master, and his master will say, okay, one day you have to go to Jerusalem and you will have to restore what you did, the mistakes you did. But before this, you should go to the oasis of them and you should study the Gospels. He receives there the writings of the Gospels, and you should make it strong into your spirit. And when you have it strong, then you can face the world again. After choosing wrong ways, we will feel into our hearts that we have to change. And we will say, okay, what a big mistake I did into my life. What a big mistake I did when I knew actually what I should be doing. So we could feel the guilt. And guilt is a difficult emotion to feel because it links us. It connects us to the past, but not in a way that you use the past to learn the new way you should take into this new position that life puts you after regretting for what we did. So the desert is the symbol of the introspection, the moment where we think, and we will look into our spirit how to get stronger and how we will understand the mistakes not as guilty, but as a lesson, but as eternal lessons to our spirit, to then flow in another direction. And this direction now will be understanding the ways that the shepherd put into our lives. I think it's possible to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I don't know if I have any more questions. Al, can you comment on the conflict between Paul and James and their eventual reconciliation?
It's interesting to see because the Pharisees, they had so strong the laws and the external way of acting, and it was so important for the Jewish people that we do know that it's difficult to create a new horizon in a mind that are living for maybe thousands of years in the same traditions. So when Paul, as a Pharisee, sees a connection to God that actually doesn't need the circumcision, that actually doesn't need to pray facing Jerusalem, that actually doesn't need to be with the food of what you eat. When Paul understands this, he wants to bring this message to the world. But James, he was a Pharisee. He was a great Pharisee. He had so much wisdom and he had so much knowledge of the Old Testament that for him it was impossible. He was living in the city of Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, if he would try to live in a different way, where he, let's say, he would not use his yarmulke, or if he was not using the way of feeding of the Jewish people or not circumcising, he would be totally against the movement of the Pharisees. He would not be comprehended. So it's natural that we see this conflict between them in that moment. But it's also very important to notice that when they have their biggest discussion, and it was a moment, a difficult moment, and Peter was with them. Peter will look at them and he will see Paul, and he will see James, and he will see the cross, Emmanuel tells to us. And the cross he will see as a balance,
Yes.
as
Scale.
as a scale, where he should put both point of view into his heart, and he should learn that people will see different stuff in different moments, and they will have different opinions. But okay, we just have to look in between different opinions, the cross, and use this scale to understand both and to live the gospels into our life. So it's interesting to see this moment, because in the chapter 14 of the letter of Paul to Romans, Paul will say about the problem of the consciousness. And he will say, if your friend, if someone thinks that he should have a different alimentation, a different food, sorry, a
Nourishment.
different, a different
Nourish.
way, a different
No- nourishment.
nourishment into his life, okay, respect. This is a problem of his conscience, individual conscience. If the person thinks, oh no, I can eat whatever, and the most important thing is to live with God, okay? Don't try to say that this person has to eat in a different way or has to circumcise. No, each and every one of us has our only way, individual way of evolving spiritually. And what Peter understand, okay, both of them has the right to think and to live with God in a different way. So it's natural that it would happen, this conflict between James and Paul, but it's also to learn and to exercise the gospel into our lives and the connections to God, to learn how to respect. I am Jew, I was born a Jew, and I'm talking to you about Jesus, but I say I respect the Jews that doesn't understand Jesus. And okay, I don't want to convert their hearts. It's not important the belief that you have, but the acts that you have are much more important than what you believe. I can say to you, I'm Christian, and maybe I live in a terrible way. And maybe I can say to you, I'm Jew, I'm Muslim, I don't believe in God at all. But I have a way of living that connects me to God because I live morality, because I live fraternity. So in this moment, we understand we just have to respect. We just have to respect, and we just have to live with gospels into our life, loving different opinions. It's okay to live with people that don't think like we think. We can learn with them. The difference is good for learning. It's good for them, it's good for us. And it's okay. Let's learn how really to love people with their difference. Because as we told in the lecture, God loves us eternally and loves us forever, infinitely, even if we take wrong mistakes. So why not with different opinion that maybe are just different ways to achieve the same place, which the connection to God.
Okay, thank you so much, Alvaro. For those who are not familiar with the work of Alvaro, of course, mainly he has been giving so many talks in Portuguese, and he has been very gracious with us at the United States Spiritist Federation to help us as well, and to bring his knowledge to share with us in the English language. As he said at the beginning, is not, of course, I mean, his native language, not even mine, but. It has been doing an excellent work, and for those who would like to hear more, he has about all the studies that he has been developing, especially bridging the old the Old Testament, the Jewish tradition with following Christianity and then Spiritism. I'm sure you're going to be amazed, and it brings a lot of knowledge for us to fill the gaps that we keep on wondering because we have not dedicated or studied that much, the first scriptures, and it's very important, and has been doing an excellent job in this sense. And thank you so much, Alvaro. I know it's always a challenge, but you have been very, very great in accepting and facing the challenge, but always knowing with a name to enlighten us all, to bring a little more of knowledge and understanding to us. And we are very grateful to you for this. And so now we are going to end our transmission, as always, with a prayer. But before that, let me invite you for next week. We are going to have Professor Alvaro Vanucci, that he's going to talk to us about faith and scientific evidences. Let us be reminded that Professor Vanucci is a professor in physics in the University of Sao Paulo. And he, of course, is going to bring to us a lot of understanding of faith from the scientific perspective. So do not miss. At the same time, 11 a.m. here in the U.S. and East Coast, and Brazil is going to be at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Let me see here. Are my friends? We enjoy hearing about spiritism as soon as I say name Jesus, they shut down. It is my knee-jerk reaction. It's want to be open. Like you said, I have to respect them and not get angry. Thank you. I was raised at Jewish. Thank you, Abby, for sharing with us as well. Yes. And I mean, from the perspective of a spiritist person, we understand that Jesus would be much better accepted by our friends in Judaism if they could understand the perspective of Jesus according to Spiritism, not as the Holy Trinity, but as a pure spirit, and then would be more easily accepted. But anyway, we keep on doing our work. So let us at this moment pray to our Heavenly Creator for all the blessings, for this possibility for us to be united with our loved ones from all over the world, that there are no more frontiers that can prevent us to feel that we are connected and that we are together. And we thank all this possibility, all the friends that have been dedicating themselves, using their time to bring this knowledge, to speak to us with their hearts, with their dedication, such as our dear friend Alvaro. So we pray that we may have a good week and that we can be here again next week and continue in this path, in this journey of spiritual involvement. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alvaro.
Ciao.
Uh,